Ima- Imagine a world where violence, corruption, and immorality dominate every aspect of life. There is no respect for God's laws, no morality, and humans are so far removed from God's will that they live without remorse, without consciousness of their actions. The earth, created by God as a paradise, has become a reflection of humanity's inner decay and destruction. This was the scenario that Noah faced. In Genesis 6:5 through 6, it is described that the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Sin had invaded the essence of humanity to such an extent that God regretted having created mankind. However, amidst this hopelessness and corruption, Noah stood out as a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time. His faith was what set him apart. In a world of deceit and selfishness, he remained faithful to divine principles. Noah's faith was a silent yet powerful resistance against a world that had chosen to turn away from God. Noah was not influenced by the society around him. He was influenced by God's word. Noah believed in a just God who still cared about the world and creation, despite all the corruption. Noah was not only righteous, but he also carried with him a vision of hope, something that no one else could see. He did not see the earth as lost forever, but believed that if mankind repented, there could be redemption. The faith he had was not passive or conformist. He had a vision of the future, based on the truth that God does not fail. And no matter how much others gave into evil, Noah knew that his faithfulness would have a profound impact. Noah was described as righteous and blameless, Genesis 6:9. What does this mean? Righteousness is not just about following rules. Being righteous is about having a clear vision of what is right and doing what is right, regardless of the circumstances. This leads us to reflect on how Noah lived in an environment where wickedness was so deeply rooted, but he remained firm in his integrity. It was difficult to be righteous in that context. Imagine the weight of living in a world where what was wrong seemed right, where corruption and violence were the norms, and where no one cared about God's laws anymore. Noah did not conform to the standards of his time, and his faith was what drove him to stand out. He was not just a morally upright man, but he had a heart dedicated to God, a pure heart despite the circumstances. Noah understood that his integrity did not depend on the behavior of others, but on his relationship with God. Noah's righteousness was not based on what was popular or acceptable. His righteousness was grounded in God's word. Moreover, Noah's faith was reflected in his daily actions. He did not just avoid sin, but actively did good, helped others, and strived to live according to God's will. This did not mean that Noah was perfect, but he sincerely sought to please God. Noah's trust in God's character made him firm and unwavering, even when it seemed like he was alone in his righteousness. When God called Noah to build the ark, it was more than just an instruction. It was a direct call to a mission of salvation, an enormous burden on the shoulders of an ordinary man, but with extraordinary faith. God told Noah that the world would be destroyed by a flood, but that he and his family would be saved, and that he should build a gigantic ark which would house a pair of every kind of animal. This was a call that required more than obedience from Noah. It required trust. Building the ark was not just a practical task. Noah had to believe God's words without any tangible sign that the flood would happen. There was no way to prove that a devastating flood was about to occur, but Noah fully trusted that if God said it, then it would happen. Noah's faith was not based on what he could see or understand, but on God's unshakable character. It is impossible to imagine the kind of resistance and internal doubts Noah must have faced. He had no examples to rely on. There were no historical records of an event like the one God was promising, so he was being called to act with faith in a completely innovative way. During the construction, the people around Noah probably laughed at him, called him crazy, and challenged him. But Noah did not let that shake him. He pressed on, moved by the faith that God had a bigger plan and purpose beyond what he could understand at that moment. He believed that this mission was not just for his salvation, but for the preservation of God's creation. Noah's faith was the strength that kept him firm through years of hard work and isolation, ignoring the criticisms, mockery, and disbelief of the world around him. Building the ark was a titanic effort, both physically and emotionally. Imagine the challenge of having to build a gigantic structure in a time when resources were limited, and no one understood why. The pressure on Noah was not only external, with mockery and disbelief, but internal, with the constant need to trust in something that seemed like madness to everyone else. Even his own family must have had moments of doubt, but Noah kept believing. For Noah, building the ark was not just a physical task, it was an expression of his unshakable faith in God. Every nail he hammered, every plank he fixed, was an act of obedience. Even when the sun was shining and everything seemed fine, Noah did not stop. He knew that his faith was not something to be expressed only in times of crisis, but in everyday life, in every choice and action. He trusted that God was giving him the strength to accomplish the impossible, and he fully committed himself to the project, regardless of the skeptical looks from others. Noah believed that in the end, his obedience and perseverance would be rewarded. He was not just following a command from God, he was actively participating in God's divine plan of salvation. He knew he was building a refuge not only for his family, but for all the creatures that God had created. Noah's perseverance, driven by faith, is one of the greatest examples of how true faith requires action. The flood was the culminating moment of Noah's faithfulness to God. When the rain began to fall and the waters started to rise, Noah saw God's word being fulfilled before his eyes. He was inside the ark, but that did not mean he was detached from the suffering and destruction around him. Noah knew that humanity was being destroyed by its own choices, and he could not help but feel the weight of God's justice, even though he knew that this justice was necessary. But Noah's faith did not waver. He knew that by entering the ark, he was obeying God's will. He did not fear the waters or the destruction because he was secure in God's promises. His faith gave him the certainty that, after the storm, something new would emerge. Even in the midst of the storm, Noah felt a peace that came from the trust that he was exactly where God wanted him to be. Divine judgment was not an end, but a new beginning. Noah understood that the destruction of the old world was necessary for humanity to have a new opportunity to live according to divine principles. His faith was anchored in the hope that renewal would come, and this hope sustained him, even in the darkest hours. After the flood, when the waters began to recede, Noah and his family left the ark and saw the transformed earth. Through destruction, God brought a new opportunity for humanity, and as a visible sign of his covenant, God made a promise to Noah. He would never again destroy the earth with a flood, and the rainbow would become a symbol of that covenant. For Noah, the rainbow was not just a natural phenomenon, it was a tangible reminder of God's faithfulness. Every time he looked up at the sky and saw the rainbow, he would know that God's covenant was eternal. Noah also knew that although humanity had failed and sin had caused great destruction, God was still willing to restore and renew. Noah's faith was rewarded, and his trust in God's promises was reaffirmed. The rainbow became not just a sign of promise, but also of redemption. Noah's faith, which had guided him throughout his journey, now had a visible symbol, reminding all of us that God is faithful and that there is always a new opportunity to start over. The story of Noah teaches us that, even in the face of the greatest adversities and challenges, unwavering faith in God is what sustains us and gives us direction. Noah was not shaken by mockery or difficult circumstances. He followed God's will, trusting that, despite the storm, something new and magnificent was to come. His faith not only guided him, but was also the key to the salvation of his family and all creation. Just like Noah, each one of us is invited to live with faith, to trust in God's promises, even when the path ahead seems uncertain. It is through this faith that we find the strength to move forward, overcome obstacles, and fulfill the purpose that God has for us. Now, I want to hear from you. How have you been living out your faith in everyday life? Have you faced moments when you needed to trust completely in God, even without understanding the details? Share in the comments, and let's grow together in faith. If this story has touched your heart and you feel you need more inspiration to continue your journey of faith, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to receive more content that will help you live with more confidence in God. Let's walk together, just like Noah, following the journey of faith